Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel again. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe it. Also, if you would like to have certain videos on different technologies or specific topics, please do send an email to dhanrohit@gmail.com or please do comment on the videos so that I can create certain videos which you guys want on specific technologies. Today's video is all about the topic of SQL Server, that is how to create SQL Server or how to create a SQL database service on Microsoft Azure. Azure SQL is offered in three varieties. One is SQL Database, second is the SQL Managed Instances, and third is the SQL Virtual Machines. The SQL Database is primarily an option which is well most suited if we want to create a new database for development purposes on the cloud. We can choose a single database or elastic pool sharing resources model in this kind of a methodology. The second is the SQL Managed Instances. This option is more suited for the compatibility purposes as specified by Azure, and we can use it as a category of lift and shift SQL databases from on-premises to the cloud. And lastly is the SQL Virtual Machines, where we want to have more control on SQL Server, the underlying operating systems. For example, if we are going to run it on a specific Windows 2019 server or Windows 2016 server, or we are going to run SQL Server on a Red Hat or as a container, so then this particular SQL Server Virtual Machine option is the best. So now it's the time to move on for an actual demonstration as to how to use Azure SQL, and we'll try to create a SQL database service within Azure. So in order to create a SQL Azure service in the portal, we firstly need to go to the Azure Portal. So as we know, the Azure Portal can be accessed through portal.azure.com. So as I'm already signed into that, it doesn't require me to ask a password because I've already signed into that, and it's just going to ask for a username which I need to access and log in into the portal. So once you are into the portal, we can create a resource and then choose SQL Azure SQL Server, and then it can give us first of the results, that is Azure SQL. So once we'll click on this is going to give us an option of creating three different types of services as we discussed. So these are all the three kinds of categories what we can create within the Azure SQL environment. We have a SQL databases as the first one, where we have a resource type as a single database or elastic pool or a database server. The database server is automatically created kind of a logical container for your SQL databases once you start creating that, and it is only available in certain particular regions and even particular type of subscriptions. The second one we already know, that is SQL Managed Instances, which is most likely where we want to have a lift and shift category and we want to maintain the maximum of the compatibility for an existing SQL Server migrations. And SQL Server Machines, we already know that we can select the predefined configured images like SQL Server 2019 on Windows Server 2019, bring your own license SQL Server 2019 on this 2019, and Red Hat Linux or Ubuntu or something like that. So you have different flexibilities as compared to the SQL Server Virtual Machines, where we want the underlying operating system as well as the SQL Server to be largely, by and large, under control with the end user. For the demonstration purposes and keeping it simple, we are going to create a SQL database and a single database. So we'll click on the create option, and once we select on the create option, we have to supply certain things. It already picks up the subscription. Then the resource group is like, we already have a resource group for that. I'll select that, or you can create a new resource. You have to supply a database name. So let's say RD database. It needs to perform certain validations on that, and all looks good. And we need to create a server also, where we can like put this database also. This server is technically a kind of a very logical container that Azure creates it for you at the background. So let's say we can create a new server, and it asks for a server name, RD SQL DB server, and it should be unique, and it looks all good. Admin, I'll give a username admin SQL, and the server name, if you see, has to be a unique, because it is going to be prefixed in database.windows.net. I'm going to give some kind of a password. Let's say it has to have certain categories where it needs to make sure that certain validations are there within the password, whether it is like a lowercase or an uppercase or some special characters or anything. And then finally you need to select the location also. I'll just select out the US West US, and then everything looks okay. I'll create okay, and the server is going to be created for me in the West US location. And do we want to use Elastic Pool? By default I'm just going to keep it no. Compute plus storage, like what kind of the database and the database transaction units are going to be used. So if we configure this, we can see there are three models. One is the basic, standard, and premium. Premium is not available for me, and standard and basic are the two models which are available for configuration. So if I choose the standard, primarily it's what the difference is the DTUs, that is the database transaction units, and it's a kind of a pricing tier where you are charged on different kind of read write capacities, or what kind of a storage you want. So for example, in case of standard, if we have a max data size of, let's say we increase it to 250 GB, so this is what it is going to show us, 19.20, kind of a like an estimated cost per month. If I'm going to increase the DTUs, let's say for example this one, so it is going to give me the estimated cost of like $192, plus it has certain restrictions regarding the free trial subscription also. So based upon whatever the DTUs you want to configure, and 10, and let's say I just want to go in for a kind of a, let's say 20 GB, so still it's giving me a 19.20. I'm good with that. I'll click on the apply, and let's move on to the next, which is the networking. So we have a network connectivity. Choose an option to configure connectivity server via a public endpoint or a private endpoint. So we can go in for a public endpoint. Allow, because we have to we are giving it as a public endpoint, so it is asking for whether you want certain Azure services to access this server. Let's say yes. Add current client IP address. So what's happening is, whatever the IP address which I'm using right now to connect to Azure, it is going to allow this particular SQL database connectivity from my client machine to this one. So that's the basic purpose of that. If we give no access, so typically I'll still be able to create the SQL database, but I will not be able to access it from a client machine or any typically one. The public endpoint should only be configured for demonstration or certain test purposes. Otherwise, you should have a managed services whereby one Azure service can access it, the SQL database, through some kind of another method, or the managed identities, which is out of the scope of this video to go for that. So let's go on to the next additional settings. data source start with a blank database restored from a backup or any sample database. So we say we can choose a none backup, we can backup our existing database, or we can use a sample database given by Azure. Database collection settings, we keep it as simple. And if we want the advanced data security like encryption or anything, so we can start with a free trial, or which is going to cost me this much amount of dollars. So I'm just going to keep it not now. And you want certain tags to be done, like a key value pair for billing purposes or for filtration purposes, we can do that. And then next, so it's in the review and create last one, it is going to give us a brief details about what we are going to do. It's a subscription is free trial, estimated cost of the SQL database by Microsoft is this much, and the client IP address for me is this one, and it is gonna allow to that particular one additional settings which is for the collation or advanced. So everything looks good, and then we just simply say create. So this starts the deployment of the SQL database on Azure. It is going to take some couple of minutes, and by the magic of this video, we'll again continue once it is done. So welcome guys, as you see the Azure SQL database has been deployed and we are into the same resource. This is the overview section of that resource. We have a server name. This is the server name that we are going to use in connection to in order to connect to the SQL server what we created. It gives up some bunch of other information, that's the pricing tier and other one. We can also set up some different things like transparent data encryption or advanced data security, tuning, auditing, or even data dynamic data masking, which we can do. Geo replication if we want to have some kind of a disaster recovery, so that we can replicate the SQL server onto some another database, onto some another region. We have other sections over here where we can see the connection strings also. These are the connection strings which we can use to technically use it in ADO.NET or JDBC or ODBC, PHP, or within Go. They have given you some kind of a sample script. So let's go on to the overview and copy this name, because this is what we are going to use to connect to this SQL server. So we go on to the SQL Server Management Studio. Let's connect that, and we already have that. I'll paste it. The login is the name which is that we created at the time of creation of the SQL server, and then we supply the password. We connect on to that, and yes, we are connected onto the SQL server. There are no databases. There's an RD database, sorry, what we created at that time, but it is gonna be empty as we don't have our user defined tables into that. So now we can just start creating with the tables, or start creating some stored procedures or functions. So it's just like using a SQL server which is on premise, might be a dev or a UAT or any other environment. So you see guys, this is one of the most easiest and simplest way by which the SQL database is created on Azure SQL. We can start working with that. It can be used for different number of use cases, whether it's like for development purposes, for testing, or for developing a minimum viable product, or for any other reasons. I hope you guys have liked this video, and please do comment and let me know how you feel about this video, and if you want some particular topics or videos to be created on specific technologies, do let me know on my email, or do comment on the video. I'll definitely try to come up with those videos in the future. Thank you for watching my video once again. Hope to see you all in the next video. Thank you. Have a nice day.